Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy J is Charles Thomas, former ABC7 political reporter.
Good morning.
And Charles, the Trump War Room, Trump campaign, released an ad after Thursday night's debate. You won't be surprised to learn. Needless to say, the drugs didn't work is the title.
Folks, how are you? Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. Excuse me, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare, we're trying to provide housing for Black Americans. The impact on the choice. The idea that they're going to, I'm been proposing that everybody, the millionaires pay 1%. So no one I've not raised the cost of Social Security for anybody. I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6.
My favorite.
And wants to get away with, get rid of the ability of Medicare for us to be able to negotiate drug prices with the big pharma companies. What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. No one was hurt. No one Israeli was accidentally killed, and it stopped. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more border patrol and more asylum officers.
You got that?
Yeah. Obviously, those were snippets of various answers throughout the debate, but there wasn't a cogent sentence among them. You know, and again, I don't want to turn this into a Kevin Kline script, but at some point, does it become a national security issue, as you were suggesting, saying, this guy has his has the nuclear codes, right? He's got the football in tow. Does it become a national security issue where he would need to be overruled if he's unable to think clearly about an important decision? I mean, you've got a couple of wars and all sorts of other threats afoot, and you have Zelensky now saying he's ready to negotiate. Speaking of one of the wars.
We have to find and to prepare this plan and to put this plan on the table during months. We don't have too much time because we have a lot of wounded and dead people on the battlefield and through civilians. That's why we don't want to have this war during years. So that's why we want to prepare this joint plan, put it on the table to the second peace summit.
Biden's administration's policy has just totally sideways in Ukraine. And it's been that way for well over a year. And the mainstream media has lied repeatedly about what's going on in Ukraine. The West is losing. NATO is losing horribly. And I've been reading it for the past year, both sides of it. And it's clear that the Biden administration has failed in this regard, and they're trying to hold out until the election.
And even if they wanted to pivot, do you have a commander-in-chief who's in the position to make a decision, make an intelligible decision to pivot?
You can't. This guy?
Stephen Bucci served America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official. He's a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies now. Stephen, thanks for joining us for our weekly confab. Your reaction to what you heard there from Zelensky?
One, I'm surprised. I thought that they would hold out longer before they because I got to tell you, if they negotiate now, it's going to be a negotiation of, okay, you can keep all the parts of our country that you took, which in and of itself is bad. But when you add to it, all this is going to do is the war will stop for a while. The Russians will rebuild. Putin will put the screws to his own country, get things tuned back up, and then they're probably going to come and take more. So I'm with Charles that this administration, though, is not in a position either on the battlefield or in the negotiating room to do anything of any benefit. If anything, they get in the negotiating room, given their record and their style, it's going to be, okay, Vladimir, what do you want? We'll put the pressure on these guys to give it to you. This is going to be a terrible disaster for the people of Ukraine and for the region.
Well, I mean, to speak to the larger issue after Thursday night's debate, too, about even if Blinken and company were able to facilitate a negotiation to to sort of the best available outcome, which of course is highly unlikely, but just for the sake of argument, what if you have a commander in chief who doesn't have the capacity to, ratify such an agreement, or is otherwise behaving erratically, or it demonstrates that he doesn't have the ability to internalize, understand, process the situation? What do you do as a senior level or cabinet level official?
Well, first, you're proposing that as if it were a hypothetical.
Well, yeah,
it's not a hypothetical. It is what we have today. Even if in some moments Biden is lucid and can think, we don't know when those moments are going to come. We don't know if halfway through a decision it's going to change. This is massively dangerous for the national security of the United States and for every country aligned with us, because the others are looking and probably chuckling and going, man, this stuff is ripe. I don't know. We don't know who's going to win in November, but boy, we got an opportunity to do something now. We ought to try and do it. So, yeah, it is a very, very dangerous situation for America right now, not just in Ukraine, but in Israel, in Latin America, in the rest of the Middle East, in Asia. Gosh, the potential all over for hostile nations to take advantage of what is now common knowledge, even though you still have some Biden allies trying to continue the gaslight and say, oh, no, what everybody else said is wrong. Come on. Ray Charles could have seen it watching the debate, and most of us saw it long before that.
Well, that's
a very tenuous time.
Well, that's the other thing I wanted to ask too. Is I know if you're watching CNN and MSNBC, you may have been surprised by what happened on Thursday night, but I assume the Chinese communists and Russian intel agencies have a little bit more broad perspective. I mean, and not to mention, you've seen him on international stages with other world leaders in behaving in a concerning fashion. So, I mean, our enemies already knew about Biden's condition, didn't they?
Absolutely. We do psychological studies of international leaders all the time. We have whole sections of the CIA that sit there. These are, psychologists with PhDs and who just watch speeches, read documents, look at film and TV to see any signal that there's something wrong with these folks. They all do the same thing to us. Can you imagine hey, we got another one. He did another speech. Oh, God, he fell down again, or he got lost on another stage. That is all grist for their mills to make decisions on what they can get away with when. And then to see this and see all of his allies, watching CNN and MSNBC after the debate, that these people were practically in tears, finally admitting what anybody with any sense has known. It's sad for America.
Hey.
I mean, I don't like Joe Biden. I think he's a very poor president. His policies are terrible, but he's still the president of our country. This is not something to celebrate today. Maybe after November we can celebrate, but right now he's still the guy in charge. He does have the nuclear codes. He will get the deference from the military and everybody else that the president is supposed to have, but he cannot operate effectively. We are in a big pickle here.
Hey, a big pickle. I can't believe I'm going to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it. Would America be better off with Kamala, who's at least not impaired, ditzy, but not impaired? I mean, would we be better off with at least in someone like even Kamala?
I would have to say yes, we would be better, though I say that very with a lot of trepidation.
You're not excited to say that. Yeah.
No, not at all. I got to say, when she was Senator Harris, and she was doing the confirmation hearings of the different Supreme Court justices, I didn't like what she did. She was mean-spirited and difficult and wrong in almost every case. In the debates before she dropped out, she was not the strongest, but she was not incompetent either. And suddenly, when the mantle of vice president dropped on her shoulders, it was like they removed her brain or gave her took away her speechwriter or something. And she no longer seemed to be capable of having serious discussions or to do it in a way that people would at least listen to the words and not get hung up on her unbelievably off-putting presentation. But, and the night of the debate, when they brought her on suddenly, she was coming across a little better than she normally does. Maybe the gravitas of the moment got her attention, and she, was able to bear down enough to do it well. But at least nobody's saying, well, she's nuts or she's, in dementia. I would have to say, at least marginally, it would be better to have her now, unless she decides, hey, I'm the lady in charge. I'm going to start making every decision, and they turn out to be really poor ones. But look, the boss is not supposed to be incompetent mentally, not incompetent like you and I don't like what he does, but incompetent like as a diagnosis. And that's kind of what we're looking at here.
Well, the other thing is when you don't have the boss in charge, you have underlings going in a lot of different directions, perhaps in a position where they can freelance and make their own policy decisions, whether or not they comport with what the boss wants to do. And I just think about this in the context of Mayorkas at Department of Homeland Security and what's going on at the border. And I mean, I know Biden's a company man, and I know the inner circle, they're open borders people basically, and they're looking to replace Americans with non-Americans, or certainly effectively dilute American citizenship by treating non-citizens and people here illegally to the same rights and benefits. But for example, on Friday he announced that I'm talking about Mayorkas. An extra 300,000 Haitian nationals will be protected from deportation, offering them work permits, citing the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Haiti. And again, I appreciate the humanitarian crisis in Haiti, which unfortunately is sort of a constant state of affairs there. But the lack of game planning to deal as that country descended into true warlordocracy against the backdrop of every day 2 workers shot dead by an illegal migrant in Texas from El Salvador, a 21-year-old girl murdered by an illegal immigrant from Ecuador in upstate New York. Every day we hear these terrible stories. Some of them were Trump reminded us of on that debate stage on Thursday night. And you get press release politics of phony baloney executive orders and tough talk, and I'm trying to get bipartisan deals. Meanwhile, you have real people who are both American citizens, as well as in Chicago, we had a migrant, illegal immigrant carjack another illegal immigrant. So, I mean, even otherwise law-abiding illegal immigrants, they're here illegally, but they're otherwise law-abiding, are vulnerable to this as well because so many of these are affiliated with international criminal organization gangs. So that the border situation, I just don't want to lose focus on that because this is real people's lives too, both Americans and non-Americans. And when you have the commander-in-chief unable to fulfill his responsibilities or unwilling to, or some combination of the two, then you just have all of these effectively functionaries freelancing like this.
Yeah, I mean, that is a scary thought right there because Mayorkas has been a train wreck from day one. They thought within DHS, because of his background in ICE, that he was going to be a great choice. He has turned out to be disastrous for the people in DHS as well as the nation. And he sits in front of Congress time after time telling whoppers that you're sitting there going, dude, have you watched the news? Even have you watched, the mainstream news that you guys agree with? They're not even painting it as rosy as you are. To think that he is now operating with essentially no supervision, that is a scary thought. And, we've seen that before, and now it's at a level when that focal point of the lack of supervision is the President of the United States. We got a big problem on our hands, domestically and internationally.
Stephen Bucci is a former Army Special Forces officer, now a fellow at the Heritage Foundation, International Politics, Geopolitics, the Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen Bucci, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to talking to you next week.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
When you're in chronic pain, you're miserable to be around, and so are the people who have to watch you suffer. So stop it. Do